Hare Krishna everyone. We welcome you all to our virtual Sunday program today. Today is the most auspicious day of the Ratha-yatra or the chariot festival of Lord Jagannath. And we have a very special guest with us, His Grace Madhavananda Prabhu, who is speaking to us from Vrindavan. And before we get on with Prabhu's class, I'll just go over our schedule quickly. So we will start off with Madhavanand Prabhu's class, and then we'll have a question and answer session, followed by announcements and then Narsimha prayers. We haven't gotten today's Deity Darshan yet, so this is the Deity Darshan from yesterday from our temple. So all of you can have the darshan, and hopefully, if by the end of the program we have today's Deity Darshan, we'll have that on as well. And I will now hand it over to Adigadal Prabhu, by whose grace we have been able to invite His Grace Madhavanand Prabhu for today's session. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, dear Sadananda Ramchandra Prabhu, for giving me this opportunity to introduce our esteemed speaker, His Grace Madhavananda Prabhu. I first heard about the glories of His Grace Madhavananda Prabhu from my spiritual master Srila Radhanath Swami Maharaj, where during a Jagannath Puri Ratha-yatra, he said that actually I am not qualified to speak about Lord Jagannath. We should hear about Lord Jagannath from His Holiness Bhakti Purushottam Swami Maharaj and from His Grace Madhavananda Prabhu. And after that, I started following Madhavananda Prabhu very carefully on Facebook and now on YouTube. And also my dear friend Amarendra Prabhu once told me that if I want to make spiritual advancement, I should read Krishna Caitanya-caritamrta Bindu magazine regularly. So then I started downloading Krishna Caitanya-caritamrta Bindu magazine from ISKCON Desire Tree and started reading it regularly. And then Hari Parshad Prabhu, I was looking up the subject of Vaishnava Aparadh. I wanted to study Vaishnava Aparadh in more detail. And my dear friend Hari Parshad Prabhu, he gave me a Krishna Caitanya-caritamrta magazine on Vaishnava Aparadh. And it is one of the most incredible magazines I have ever read. It made it so clear about the dangers and what Vaishnava Aparadh is. And then I found out that Madhavananda Prabhu has come out with many such magazines. There are 2 magazines on Lord Shiva, and there is a magazine on Lord Jagannath. And these magazines are a mine of spiritual gems. So Madhavananda Prabhu is a very, very glorious disciple of His Holiness Gaur Govinda Swami Maharaj. And we all know Gaur Govinda Swami Maharaj very well. He is very, very beloved disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and he came to New Panihati Dham, ISKCON Atlanta, in the year 1922. And our esteemed speaker, His Grace Madhavananda Prabhu, was there on that tour with Sri Srimad Gaur Govinda Maharaj. And the historical lectures that Sri Srimad Gaur Govinda Maharaj delivered at New Panihati Dham, they were later on transcribed and compiled into a beautiful book, which Madhavananda Prabhu is showing all of us. Mathura meets Vrindavan. I actually have a whole shelf of books. This is my favorite book, The Embankment of Separation by Srila Gaur Govinda Maharaj. The most wonderful little book, Gopal Jiu. Worship of Sri Guru, also by Sri Srimad Gaur Govinda Maharaj. When Good Fortune Arises. And of course, Mathura meets Vrindavan. And then there are Krishna Caitanya-caritamrta magazines, and then Krishna Caitanya-caritamrta Bindu is available for free download on ISKCON Desire Tree, my dear friends. And I humbly request all of you to please utilize this great opportunity and read those magazines. Our Madhavananda Prabhu is the editor and he's the publisher of all these wonderful magazines and literatures, and he's continuing the great legacy of Sri Srimad Gaur Govinda Maharaj. And Madhavananda Prabhu and His Holiness Bhakti Purushottam Swami Maharaj both have a very intimate connection with Sri Srimad Gaur Govind Maharaj. When Srila Bhakti Purushottam Maharaj was here last year, or 2 years ago, in New Panyati Dham, I was asking him, can you please tell me how to make spiritual advancement? And literally, Bhakti Purushottam Swami Maharaj had tears in his eyes. And he said, in my initial years, when I was in Jagannath Puri, when I was in Orissa, Sri Srimad Gaur Govind Maharaj, he helped me so much, he guided me so much, and he is my Shiksha Guru. And in the book Death that Bhakti Purushottam Maharaj wrote, he dedicates the full chapter. He said actually that inspiration to write that book, Death, was Sri Srimad Gaur Govind Maharaj. Because he said his is the most perfect departure. And he dedicates a whole chapter to Sri Srimad Gaur Govind Maharaj in that book, Srila Bhakti Purushottam Maharaj. And then he said that it was Sri Srimad Gaur Govind Maharaj who took me to Mayapur Dham to take initiation from Srila Jayapataka Swami Maharaj. So he said, but my Shiksha Guru is Sri Srimad Gaur Govind Maharaj. And of course, Madhavananda Prabhu has been, for years, he has been the personal servant of Sri Srimad Gaur Govind Maharaj. And we can see in his purity, in his writings, in his lectures, how Sri Srimad Gaur Govind Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada are empowering him. So Prabhuji, it is our great good fortune. Good fortune has arisen today for all of us that you have accepted our invitation. And my obeisances to you, my obeisances to Her Grace Krishna Kunda Mataji. And we are all, and we just want to eagerly drink the nectar that you are going to share with us. Please go ahead, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Hare Krishna.
Gosh, I don't know. After an introduction like that from Adi Gadadhar Prabhu, I don't know if I'm going to get hit by a bolt of lightning from Indra to smash my pride. Or it reminds me of a prayer that I once heard in America that, dear God, please let me become the kind of person that my cat thinks I am. So, Adi Gadadhar Prabhu is a wonderful personality. I hope I can become a tiny little something of which. So today here in Puri is the day of Navayovana Darshan, and this is also Gundicha Marjana Day. Tomorrow's a Ratha-yatra, but this is a different kind of Ratha-yatra. It's a different kind of Ratha-yatra here. It's a different kind of Ratha-yatra all over the world. Here in Puri, I have some friends who came down from Mayapur. They arrived last night. It's good they did because all the trains are stopped from today. And strictly, no one's allowed to move anywhere in the city today in Puri. And in Grand Road, no one's allowed to take part in the Ratha-yatra festival. Only the pandas will pull the carts. The only way you can actually watch live in person the festival is if you have a house on Grand Road and you look out your window. If they catch you on the roof, the police will come with sticks to beat you. Means that people love Jagannath and Ratha-yatra, and Indian people are very clever. If there's a tiny opportunity, you'll have 500,000 people here very easily. So they have to be very, very strict about it. But what I'd like to speak about tonight is different types of different understandings about Ratha-yatra and how this lockdown is not the first time. It happened last year, but it's happened many times in the past also. We'll be speaking, Prabhuji said we made a magazine about Jagannath. We made 4 magazines, but we'll be speaking mostly from this one, which about a story about Aurangzeb and Jagannath and Ratha-yatra. Very interesting story, which is some historical research that we did about Jagannath. And we'll also tell some stories, some things. But before I do that, I'd just like to recite a few prayers. Ragraganya gana go to goloru hadam goranga gudatama gopyada kolpa briksham Gopala gada ratidam yati singha gora Govinda deshikavaram satatam namami Uttama adama kichuna bachila Jachia dile kakola kahe premananda emona goranga hridoya dadiya bola bhaja goranga kaha goranga laha gorangera namare jai jana goranga bhaje se hoyamara pranare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Yashaiva Padambuja Bhakti Labhya, Prema Bidana Padama Pumata, Tasmai Jagan Mangala Mangalaya. Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste. Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste. Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste. Madgavirapi Gopala Sri Kuryat Kripaya Jari Tadaiva Sambhaya Pidva Rishi Yustat Priya Janaha. Shri Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Sasanatana Rupaka Gopala Raghunatapta Brajabala Bapahimam Kadaha Chitkalindi Tatavipina Sangita Karavo Mudabiri Nadivadana Kamalasvadamadupa Rama Shambhu Brahma Madapati Ganesha Chitapado Jagannatha Swami Noyana Patagami Bhavatume Nilachala Nivasaya Nityaya Paramatmane Balabhadra Subhadrabhyam Jagannatayate Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, I want to thank the devotees from Nupanihati for kindly asking us to take part in this program tonight. I was mentioning for those of you who weren't here a few minutes ago that this is a time of Ratha-yatra, and Ratha-yatra is a time when Lord Jagannath comes out of the temple. Sometimes the Pandas here in Puri, I've been here in Orissa for 25 years, they've told me, Madhavananda, you're very unfortunate. And I say, why? And they said, you can't go inside the temple. I only know a few words in Odia. Bideshi Prabesh Nishad. Same in Hindi and in Bengali also. Huh? And I ask him, I say, well, I don't have to go inside the temple, I tell them. Rather, Jagannath comes outside of the temple to see me. And we call that Ratha-yatra. This is the only temple that I am aware of where the Mula Vigraha, the main deities, traditionally comes out of the temple to give his darshan. So the devotees in Nupanihati tonight with Adi Gadadhar Prabhu and others have asked me to say something about the glories of Ratha-yatra. Ratha-yatra means many different things to different people. And that's, in one sense, reality is subjective. Even the absolute truth is subjective. Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaniti Sabdhate. Depending on your perspective, you'll see the Lord in a particular way. In Vrindavan Das Thakur and Chaitanya Bhagavat, he says, Jai Rupa Chinte, Dasi Se Kripa Se Rupa Hoy, that the Lord manifests a form according to the mood of the devotee. So Ratha-yatra is also understood in so many different ways by so many different people. A few years ago, we made a magazine. I'll show you the cover. The Hidden Identity of Lord Jagannath. I'll look at the cover picture. Does he look very hidden? He doesn't look very hidden. There's some irony in that picture. And we wrote a long article speaking about the different perspectives of Jagannath and how every year at Ratha-yatra, when it's not lockdown, you have politicians who come, you have movie stars from Bollywood who come. And who is Jagannath to them? He's a cultural symbol. He's someone who may help them to get elected to office. and you have present at the festival, you have Shaivites, you have Shaktas, you have Ganapatnis, you have Christians, you have Muslims, you have the Ramanuja Vaishnavas, Madhva Vaishnavas, Gaudiya Vaishnavas, and they all see Jagannath in a different way. So just as Jagannath is understood in so many different ways, so also Ratha-yatra can be understood in many different ways too. Some years ago, we were traveling and giving some classes. We went to Budapest, Hungary, and the devotees requested me to give a talk at the Ratha-yatra festival. And honestly, that was about the first talk I'd given in public before non-devotees in like 6 or 8 years. I was just used to speaking to devotees. So I'm looking at the people, and I marked that right next to the Ratha-yatra carts, there was a big gambling casino. And a lot of the people who were watching the Ratha-yatra program, they were coming out of the casino, and they had beers and hamburgers and cigarettes in their hands. Some of the men had their arms around girls, and I don't know if those girls were their wives. Anyway, Hare Krishna. There were a lot of different people who were present there, and I'm supposed to say something to them about Ratha-yatra. And I thought, what can I say? So I thought, anyway, I'll just tell them the truth. And I said, this festival celebrates rescuing God from mechanical, organized religion and bringing him to the village of our heart. As soon as I said that, all the people, they picked up and they became very interested. And we spoke something in those lines because that's Ratha-yatra, right? Rescuing God from mechanical, organized religion and bringing him to the village of our heart. So just as we're locked up, at least here in Jagannath Puri, I don't know what things are like in Atlanta now. I know in America, different places, it's Adigadar says a little bit of both. Still, many people, they're feeling very fed up. Many people are agitated and annoyed. I find India to be a little different. The first time I came to India was in 1993. We went to Jammu in Kashmir, and we were on a bus in the mountains, and I'd fallen asleep. It was nighttime, and all of a sudden there was a big jolt, and the bus stopped. And everybody on the bus was quiet. And then after a minute, everybody on the bus just started getting off. And nobody said anything. I also got up and got off. And I found, to my horror, that the bus driver had fallen asleep or something. And we come to a bridge, and he ran off. Just right next to us, this is in the mountains in Himalayas, there's, I don't know, probably a 200-meter drop-off or something. And one of the wheels of the bus had gone over the cliff and stopped right there. And it's one thing I really marked about India. That was my first visit to India. And I was really struck that all the people got off the bus and everybody was perfectly calm and everybody just accepted it. And we just stood there in the dark on the side of the road until the next bus came and everybody got on. If it would have been in America, they have a new title for people in America. They call them Karen, right? You would have so many Karens screaming and shouting and calling the lawyers to make a suit against the bus driver or something, the company. People would be screaming and crying in terror. But in India, they have a saying here in Orissa, Jagannath Anka Icha, which means whatever Jagannath desires, Bhagavan Anka Icha, whatever the Lord desires, they accept. My Guru Maharaj once told us that when there's a situation that you can't control, then you should accept that as the Lord's arrangement. And largely here in Puri, I see there's no protest. People just very simply, they wear the mask because that's what they're told to do. This is what Jagannath has arranged. And they go on like that. So just as we're locked up right now, also Jagannath becomes locked up. And just as there's a deep purport to his lockup, we can also find a purport to our lockup. So Ratha-yatra means a journey. And before we begin our journey, a journey begins with planning. Planning in turn begins with desire. If you want to come to India, the first thing is, what is your desire? Maybe you want to go to Gujarat because you want to see your mother. She's going to cry if you don't go to see her, or your grandmother, or whatever. Or you want to, you're a Bideshi. I become confused. I'm watching all of you like Adi Gadadhar Prabhu, and I don't know who's a Deshi and who's a Bideshi. I'm kind of a Bideshi Deshi. It's especially confusing when I go to America. I'm speaking before persons who are from Indian origin. So, and some Bideshis, maybe they may come to India and the first thing they want to do is to go to the Taj Mahal or whatever. But a journey begins with desire. And Lord Jagannath's journey of the Ratha-yatra also begins with desire. And I'd like to tell you some stories about that. There's a wonderful book called the Madhula Panji, which we translated some things from a few years ago for an article that we wrote in our magazine about Jagannath's Ratha-yatra and about why it is that the Bideshis, they had to hear this thing all the time, Bideshi Prabeshni Shade, entrance forbidden. And the Ratha-yatra begins on an earlier day. You may say it begins on Akshaya Tritiya. That's when they begin to make the Ratha-yatra carts. Or you can say it begins on the day of Pandava Nirjala Kadasi. And that's where I want to start tonight. On the day of Pandava Nirjala Kadasi, there's a special festival. It's Lakshmi Narayan Vivaha. They have a marriage between Lakshmi Devi and Lord Jagannath. And for all the ladies who are paying attention to they have a ceremony that goes on. And part of the ceremony, they take the cloth, the uttariya of Lakshmi Devi, and they tie it together with the cloth of Lord Jagannath. And they're married, right? They tied the knot. So then 4 days after that marriage ceremony, there's another festival, which is Snan Purnima, Snan Yatra. And that's actually Lord Jagannath's birthday. Lord Jagannath has several birthdays. One of them is Janmashtami, but another day is Snan Purnima. And I won't get into so much into that. That's a long discussion. Maybe you've read our Guru Maharaj's discussion, 3 Logs of Wood. And there's many things aside from that to be said traditionally, historically in Jagannath Puri about Snan Yatra. I won't go so much into that except to say that it was on Snan Purnima that Lord Jagannath first appeared before Indradyumna Maharaj. And Jagannath first appeared in the form of Lord Nrsingadev, which is one reason why the Pandits, they say that in the previous yuga, the mantra they used to worship Lord Jagannath was Ugram Viram Mahavishnum Jalantam Sarvato Mukam Nishingham Vishanam Bhadram Mityu Mityam Namamyaham, which is still the mantra they use today to worship Sudarshan with, interestingly. And then Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra manifested their forms, and it was in the Gundicha Mandir that Vishvakarma came and carved those deities, and that's why that place is considered to be Sundarachal, or like Vrindavan. And that's where Lord Jagannath appeared. So it's his birthday. And on his birthday, they have a big festival, and he comes out on top of the roof of the temple. This year, they also blocked off all the streets and everything, and we couldn't go. And Lord Jagannath has a public bath. There's a well called the Sunakua, the gold well, which they say is only used once a year for Lord Jagannath's Snan Yatra. And that well, they say, is covered with gold, and it's locked up in a certain place. And the Pandas, they come and they pour over 100 pots of water on the head of Lord Jagannath. Now, if you had someone were to pour 100 pots of water on you outside with a nice ocean breeze coming, you might get a bit of a headache. So Lord Jagannath, he becomes sick. My Guru Maharaj once commented that Jagannath doesn't become sick. Jagannath is Nava-yovana. And this is the day known as Nava-yovana Darshan. We'll come to explain that in a moment, what that is. But on this day, on the day of Ratha-yatra, Lord Jagannath seems to become sick. And the non-devotees have a certain understanding of that sickness, but the devotees of Jagannath have another understanding. That Anavasara is a time of Lord Jagannath's sickness. It has several different meanings. Srila Prabhupada comments on it in Chaitanya-caritamrta. He says the word Anavasara is used when Sri Jagannath Ji cannot be seen in the temple. After the bathing ceremony, Ratha-yatra, Lord Jagannath apparently becomes sick. He is therefore removed to his private apartment where no one can see him. Actually, during this period, renovations are made on the body of the Jagannath deity. This is called Nava-yovana. During the Ratha-yatra ceremony, Lord Jagannath again comes before the public. Thus, for 50 days, after the bathing ceremony, Lord Jagannath is not visible to any visitors. So there's a Bahiranga Karan and an Antaranga Karan behind this Anavasara period. The Bahiranga Karan is that Lord Jagannath's transcendental body becomes smeared. The white color that they use on Lord Jagannath, they don't go to the paint shop to get some colors, but they use powdered conch shell for the white. And the black, they put some honey in a silver bowl and they burn underneath that. And the black soot that comes, that's the black on Jagannath's face. And the red and yellow colors that are used also come from natural minerals. So those natural colors, when they bathe Lord Jagannath, the colors start smearing. And so Lord Jagannath has to be renovated. Also, Lord Jagannath, we say that he's Daru Brahma, that he's made out of wood. But actually, Lord Jagannath has 7 layers to his body, just as there's 7 different layers to a human body. And that's another topic which would take us a long time to discuss. I have a lot of things we'd like to speak about tonight, so I'm running a little bit. And as we're running past different roads on the way, I'm just kind of pointing the road to where without going down that road. Just as an input of interest, you may see it's a little dull colored now. There's a red cloth. This rope is a silk rope. It's actually an incarnation of Lord Balaram. It was given to me by one of the Mahants in Puri. And this is what they use to tie Lord Jagannath to the Ratha-yatra cart with. And it's mentioned in Chaitanya-caritamrta. This is an incarnation of Lord Balaram. But this cloth right here was given to me by one of my Panda friends who has a service every year, which just finished a day or two ago, of renovating Lord Jagannath's body. And this cloth is actually one of the layers of Lord Jagannath's body. It's part of Jagannath's body. So, and this cloth here is from Tota Gopinath, another one of the Pandits gave this to me. So Lord Jagannath, he seems to become sick, and that period is called Anabhasra. It's also called Nibritta, and the word Nibritta means in a solitary place. And the Chaitanya-caritamrta describes that Tanhara Samati Lana Bhakti Shukadite Rati Chari Bahira Hoila Bihara Korite. That Lord Jagannath Bahira Hoila Bihara Korite. He comes out of the temple to perform some pastimes after Tanhara Samati, taking some permission from Lakshmi Devi. So this journey of Lord Jagannath begins with his desire. And the word anavasara has a number of different meanings. It's a Sanskrit word. The general meaning of anavasara is something which is ill-timed or an absence of leisure. It means like when you're sick and you're in the hospital and you can't do what you want to do. It's something ill-timed. It's an absence of leisure. But there's a more confidential meaning of the word anavasara also. If we break the word up into different, it's a compound word. Ana means to get a small breath. And the word ava means to become determined or generous. And the word Sri, it's a synonym for the word Sri, which means pleasure or wealth or love. Avas means to move toward Sar. Sar means the essence of something. So it also means to get a small breath to move towards love. And there's a very confidential purport behind the Anavasra period. Lord Jagannath, why does he come out of the temple for his public bath? What is the necessity? How many of you get your bath in public? Now, you may say that Lord Jagannath does that, one reason to give darshan to his devotees, but there's another more confidential reason. Because prior to maybe 100 years or so ago, from the top of the Jagannath Mandir, you could very easily see to the Gundicha. And Lord Jagannath, he's feeling so much separation from Srimati Radharani, the gopis of Braj. And he's a married man, and he's thinking this marriage, this will make my feelings of separation go away. But instead of making them go away, it increases the fire over and over again. And so he has such a desire to see Radharani, to see the Brijbasis, that he says, for my birthday this year, I'd like to go up on top of the roof. And he goes up there, and they give him a bath. And it seems like the water makes him sick, but it's not the water that makes him sick. He becomes lovesick. What are the medicines that they give to Lord Jagannath during this time? They give him different fruits and roots, things that you might find in a vana. Vana means a forest, like a Vrindavana, like the forest of Vrindavan. And during those 15 days of Anavasra, which is also known as Nibritti. Nibritti means inactive or out of sight. It also means concealed, something hidden, a secret, a covert. It means Jagannath's hidden secret. So Jagannath has this hidden secret at this time. He has this desire which arises in his heart. And just as any journey begins with a desire, the journey of Ratha-yatra begins with Lord Jagannath's desire, which comes at the time of Snan Yatra and then Anavasra. That Nibritti, that secret desire of Lord Jagannath arises. And so for 15 days, Lord Jagannath is sick. Now Lakshmi Devi, let's give her credit. She's a very, very good wife. And for 15 days, she doesn't sleep. I've never heard of a wife like that. For 15 days, she doesn't sleep. She's just taking care of her husband. She is such a good wife. Now, after 15 days, and you can't blame her, she becomes really, really tired. And Lakshmi Devi falls asleep. As soon as Lakshmi Devi falls asleep, what does Lord Jagannath do? Immediately, he reaches down and he unties the knot that's connecting his cloth to the cloth of Lakshmi Devi. And he leaves the Jagannath Mandir to go see his girlfriends. And we call that Gundicha Yatra or Ratha-yatra. And Lakshmi Devi doesn't even know anything about it because she's dead asleep. And there's so many wonderful things we could say about Ratha-yatra. There's so many amazing details. We're not going. It would be. I think you could give a seminar for a few hours a day for several months to speak about that. It's such a unlimited topic. We're just going little quick and to try to focus on certain topics tonight. So Lakshmi Devi wakes up after a few days, and she looks around, and she's confused. She asks one of the pandas, "Where's my husband?" Now the panda, he's getting very nervous. He says, well, you see, he kind of sort of went outside. He went to see his girlfriends. And Lakshmi Devi becomes very, very upset. And she decides, I'm not going to take any opulent food. She goes and she locks herself up in the go down, and she only accepts very, very simple village rice. And in Orissa, these village ladies, these old ladies, they know some secrets. They know which weeds we would consider to be a weed, which you can cut and make into sak or spinach, sagu. And she takes only that, very simple things. She doesn't take bath for several days. And she doesn't, she puts on old worn cloth. And then finally, after 4 days, she goes to see one of her elderly lady friends, because that's what ladies do, right? If her husband's being very bad, then the ladies, they go to see her girlfriend, right? And they speak to them. So she goes to see the we're reading something from the Vamadeva-samhita, which is a sthala Purana here in Jagannath Puri, which we translated some sections of for our previous magazine about Lord Jagannath. And Lakshmi Devi at this time, she goes to speak to goddess Bimala Devi. Bimala Devi is the auntie of Lord Jagannath. And she explains the whole scenario to Bimala Devi. She said, it's very bad. We just got married. He untied the cloth. He didn't even say anything. For 15 days, I didn't sleep. I was such a good wife. I didn't nag him, nothing. And then he left. He didn't tell me. And he took his sister with him. He could have taken me with him, but he didn't. He took his sister with him. This is very, very bad. And Goddess Bimala Devi, she replies, Yadadavo vapi viveka shunyo Pyachutanam tatva prasidam eva chunam grihitvapi davopi yatra tatpashvaka gacha sudeshwari tvam. Yada, if yada davo va pivaveka sunyo, if viveka sunya, your husband loses his good intelligence, he loses his brains, right? It happens sometimes. All the ladies, they know that. We can speak very honestly. Then what should you do? Then at that time, you should take shelter of some magic. And Goddess Bimala Devi, she gives her some special churna, some special powder. She says, you take this and you go and to before Lord Jagannath and you blow it in his face and he'll regain his intelligence. Now, at this point, I'd like to ask a question from the devotees. You could raise your hand or make some comment, unmute yourself for a moment. First of all, I'd like to ask the ladies who are present here today, that how many ladies, and mark it, probably your husbands are watching what you have to say, how many ladies think it's very, very bad that Lord Jagannath left his newly wedded wife, who served him so nicely, to go see his girlfriends? Are there any ladies who are present tonight who think that's bad? Your husbands are probably watching, so be careful. Mina's raising her hand, okay? Anybody else think that's a very bad thing? Huh? My wife is raising her hand here. And Seema is saying, yes, Prabhuji, it's a very bad thing. Renu's also raising her hand. Any other ladies raising their hand? Any other ladies that feel like it's a bad thing? Okay. So now I'd like to ask Adi Gadadhar Prabhu and some of the men that, how many of the men, Dibyangi Lalita also thinks it's a bad thing that Lord Jagannath did. Now I want to ask the men a question, okay? How many men say that, well, it's okay? There's no harm because Lord Jagannath, after all, he's a supreme personality of Godhead, and there's nothing bad about it, right? How many men think that it's okay? Raise your hand. Any men who think like that? Adi Gadadhar Prabhu is raising his hand. So this is why we have marriage problems, I think, sometimes in ISKCON. There's a failure to communicate sometimes. So Lakshmi Devi, then 5 days after Lord Jagannath is left, on the Panchami, there's a word in Oriya, Hera. Hera means to see. And there's a special festival called Hera Panchami. And let me see if I can bring this up. And on this day of Hera Panchami, I have a photograph. I'm sorry, it's not the... Can I share the screen? Looks like... Can I do that?
Yes, Prabhu. You are the co-host, so you can.
Okay. Let's see here. But I don't see... I'm clicking on share screen. Okay, there we go. So you can see Lakshmi Devi here. This is Lakshmi Devi. She, after 5 days, she takes a bath. She puts on her nicest sari, her solid gold ornaments, and along with her girlfriends, she sets out to meet her husband. And that's called Hera Panchami. So Lakshmi Devi, she goes to the Jagannath Mandir. And as you know, she is a really heavy personality. She's very angry. She breaks part of Jagannath's cart. She beats up some of the pandas. She ties them up with ropes. And then she goes inside to see Lord Jagannath. And when she goes inside to see Lord Jagannath's there. He's very happy. He's with Radharani and the gopis, and life is very good. And then all of a sudden, there's his wife. And Lord Jagannath realizes, oh boy, I'm really in big trouble. But he doesn't say anything. And Lakshmi Devi doesn't say anything. She comes before Lord Jagannath, and she has this powder in her hand, and she blows the powder in Jagannath's face. And then she comes back out of the temple. There's 2 different doors. I've attended this festival several times. She comes out of the other door, the southern door. She goes into the northern gate, and she comes out the southern gate. And then Lord Jagannath realizes, now I'm really, really in big trouble. And then takes part what's known as a bahudha Ratha-yatra. Bahudha means to return, and that takes place on the Ekadasi. They know in Orissa as the Bahudha Ekadasi. And Lord Jagannath, he comes out of the temple, and he goes to see Lakshmi Devi. On the way, the king of Puri, he comes out, and there's a ceremony they call Lakshmi Narayan Bet. It means that the king of Puri acts like a marriage counselor. Sometimes devotees, they feel a little embarrassed. We have to go see a marriage counselor. Nobody should know about this. My husband and I are arguing. But don't worry. It happens with Lord Jagannath even. And the king of Puri, he becomes a marriage counselor. It's nothing to be ashamed of. And he goes to Lakshmi Devi, and he tells Lakshmi Devi, see, your husband, he loves you. And there he is. He's coming to see you. And he sent a nice elephant. One of Lakshmi Devi's names is Gaja Lakshmi, because she rides an elephant. And traditionally, here in Puri, they don't do this anymore. They've kind of downgraded the festival over the years due to lack of funds. But they used to send an elephant for Lakshmi Devi. And Lakshmi Devi refuses because she's become Manini Nayak. She's become a sulky, angry lady. In the Ujjvala Nilamani of Srila Rupa Goswami describes 4 different types of vipralamba or separation. Purvarag, Man, Prema Vaichitya, and Prabhas. The second is called Man. Man means some loving, sulky anger. And it's interesting to note, Rupa Goswami says that there are 2 types of Man. There's Hoitaki Man, anger with a cause. Lakshmi Devi has a cause because her husband did something very bad. He left her to go see his girlfriend. Any wife has a good right to be angry with her husband. But Rupa Goswami says one reason the lady becomes angry is called Hoitaki Man, but the other is Ahoitaki Man, anger for no reason. Just like on one occasion, Krishna was glorifying Radharani, and he said, my dear Radhika, your face is as beautiful as the full moon. And Radharani became very angry with him. What do you mean my face is like the moon? The moon has so many marks on it. You're trying to say something about my face? And Krishna said, no. I didn't mean it like that. So for those of you who are married, this is positive evidence that God himself has given ladies the right to be angry for no reason. It happens, right? There's Hoitaki Man and Ahoitaki Man. So Lakshmi Devi, she's very angry because my husband went to see this other ladies. It's very, very bad. So Lord Jagannath, he has to somehow try to pacify Lakshmi Devi's man. So some years ago, I wrote an article for our Jagannath magazine about the different dresses of Jagannath, and you'll see one of the dresses here. This is probably the most popular and well-known dress of Lord Jagannath. And incidentally, look on Jagannath's face. You see his eyes, how they're kind of smeared, and it looks a little bit like Jagannath needs to shave or something because the colors are fading. and you see the white line around his eyes. See, when the Pandavas carry Jagannath out, the festival they call the Pahandi, which also has a very deep purport to it, which I won't go there today, but we're pointing a direction down the road. They're handling Jagannath, and the colors again become smeared. So they take some chalk and they mark around his eyes. You can see that there. So here on Jagannath, in this dress, this is called Sunavesh. Suna in Oriya means gold. And you see, Lord Jagannath has solid gold hands. He has a solid gold crown. He has solid gold earrings and nose rings, and he has different ornaments. He has solid gold feet. They say that on this day, between Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, the deities are wearing more than 1 ton of solid gold ornaments. Now, many years ago, when I was writing something about doing some research and writing about the different dresses of Jagannath, for first magazine we made, let me just stop showing us. First magazine we made about Lord Jagannath, which also has the Sunavation. You can see Jagannath's golden feet on the cover. I found out about the histories and the stories behind all these different dresses, but one dress I couldn't find out about was the Sunavesh. I found out what he wore, the different story. So after we made the magazine, someone invited us to meet Gajapati Dibya Singh Dev, the king of Puri. And we went to see him, and I gave him a magazine, and I had some inspiration. I said, Maharaj, you're the world's foremost authority in Lord Jagannath. What is the history behind the Sunavesh? And Gajapati Maharaj looked at me for a moment. He's such a gentle, nice Vaishnav. And he said, well, to tell you the truth, I don't know. He said, but you can go to such and such Panda. He sent me to the Raj Guru, the Panda who traditionally is their family, the gurus for the kings of Puri. You ask him. And we did, and that's another long story about the Sunavesh, which we don't have time to tell you tonight. But there's another reason why Lord Jagannath is wearing that dress. Because you see, he's come back from the village of Vrindavan, from seeing his girlfriends. And he's come back to who? To the goddess of fortune. And he's come back to her temple, by the way. It's not called the Jagannath Mandir. It's called the Sri Mandir here in Puri. He's come back to the Sri Mandir. And when he comes back, Lakshmi Devi, she's very, very angry with him. So at that time, Lord Jagannath has to try to pacify Lakshmi Devi. So what does he do? How do you pacify the goddess of fortune? You have to show that I've given up all that simple village stuff and I'm your man. And I'm dressed up really, really opulently. Right? And so he dresses in this Sunavesh to show that, no, Lakshmi Devi, I really relate to you. Now on the next day, after that bahudha Ekadasi, when Lord Jagannath wears that Sunavesh, and sometimes here in Puri, there's more yatris, more pilgrims who come to have darshan of the Sunavesh than there is during Ratha-yatra. But the Gaudiya Vaishnavas generally don't appreciate that Sunavesh time. That's another thing. So Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, then they go back inside the temple. There's another Pahandi. And Balaram goes, and then Subhadra goes, and they're banging the gongs and blowing the horns and saying, Sri Jagannath Swami Ki Jai, and Balaram and Subhadra and Sudarshan all go inside the temple. And then Lord Jagannath starts to go in, and they're banging the gongs and blowing the horns and Sri Jagannath Swami Ki Jai. And the gate is slammed shut in front of Lord Jagannath. And when Lord Jagannath goes there, there's a lady's voice that comes from the other side of the door. And you know what the voice says? Prabesh nishad. Entrance forbidden. I don't feel so bad that I can't go inside the Jagannath Mandir. I have good company. Lord Jagannath also gets locked out. And sometimes I tell the Pandas, I say, you're a Panda, you know so much. You please tell me, who does Jagannath give more mercy to? Krishna give more mercy to? The Bridge Basis or the Dwarka Basis? And the Pandits say, everybody knows the Bridge Basis. And I tell them it's a lie. How can you say that? He left them. He made them cry. But the Dwarka Basis were able to see him every day. But actually, you're correct. He gave more mercy to the Bridge Basis because he made them cry in separation. He made them cry, Jagannath Swami, Nayana Patagami, Bhavatume. Oh, my dear Lord, may I see you again. So I tell them I don't feel bad. This is the mood in Jagannath Puri. So Lord Jagannath, he sends then a bard. There's a singer who goes and he sings a really romantic song and singing a love song to Lord Jagat, the Lakshmi Devi, that your husband loves you so much and he's come to see you again. And just see that when that doesn't work, he brought you a brand new sari and some nice earrings and this and that. And the voice comes from the other side of the door. Go away. And this goes on for some time until finally the outer door is open. And then with the gongs banging and drums beating and bugles blowing and people shouting, Sri Jagannath Swami Ki Jai, Lord Jagannath goes inside the temple and up to 22 steps to the next door, which he finds locked. Lakshmi Devi is very angry. And then there's a message. Lord Jagannath's messenger comes there and speaks to her. And he says that Jagannath feels so bad. He really loves you. Please forgive him. And Lakshmi Devi then, she tells her maidservants, you give him the following message, which is found in the Vamadeva-samhita. Atastali smakam api devi chandi stita vibho asmin stali pitvat sokyam deva nasti priyanahi. You tell him that his sweet, loving wife is no longer here. And for those of you who know something about Vedic culture, you may appreciate what she told him then. She said, he's not going to find his sweet, loving wife here. The only person he's going to find is Goddess Chandi. Now, for those of you who come from a Hindu background, you know something about Goddess Chandi. She's an angry, very angry form of Goddess Durga. And if you see a deity form of Goddess Chandi, you can recognize her. She has a number of hands. In one hand, she has a big chopper, like a big sword. And in her other hand, she has a man's head that she cut off. So she's really an angry person. So Lakshmi Devi is telling, you tell Jagannath that he's not going to find his sweet, loving wife here. All that he's going to find is Goddess Chandi. There's no happiness for him here. So he should go away. And then she goes on to say, Chandanadi sugandam yad bhakshabo jadi kam shayat idam virharani stanam tatstanam gachtahevibo. I know my husband. He likes nice sandalwood paste. He likes nice oil. He likes nice cloth and soft beds and everything nice. You tell him he's not going to find these things here. Tell him he should go back to his girlfriends. They must be feeling great separation from him. Lakshmi Devi is very, very angry. At that time, there's another ceremony. And Lord Jagannath, they make huge pots of rasgullas. And they offer those rasgullas to Lakshmi Devi. And they say, please don't be angry. Lord Jagannath loves you. And finally, Lakshmi Devi says, okay. And then Lord Jagannath is allowed back inside of the temple. And that there's another ceremony, which is also considered, in a way, another appearance day of Lord Jagannath. That's known as Niladri Vijay. Because on that day, that's the day that Lord Jagannath was originally installed in the Jagannath Mandir. Snan Purnima is the day that Jagannath appeared at Gundicha. And Niladri Vijay, the day that Jagannath enters back in the temple after Ratha-yatra, is the day that he was installed in the temple. And so there's a big festival. It's very romantic. Lakshmi and Jagannath are again reunited, but it's not over yet. They put Jagannath back on the altar and they put Lakshmi Devi next to him. And then they have a special ceremony, the final ceremony. They take part of Lakshmi Devi's cloth and Jagannath's cloth and they tie a knot in the two. And Jagannath has come back to Lakshmi Devi. So this is Ratha-yatra. And there's so many things we could speak about this and some of the internal reasons of bahudha Ratha-yatra. I won't go in that direction today because our time is very less. But I'd like to just tell you a little history, a little very known history about Lord Jagannath. For those of you who are from India originally, you know a lot probably about Aurangzeb and how Aurangzeb slaughtered, he murdered ruthlessly millions of Hindus in India. He broke many, many temples. He did so many terrible things. I won't go in that direction and speak about it. I find it very interesting, by the way, if you read in the writings of the six Goswamis, it was one of the worst times of persecution practically in the history of the world with the Muslims, and they were murdering and torturing brutally different Vaishnavas, and they broke the Govindaji Mandir, they broke the Janmastan in Mathura. So I went to part of that original Janmastan that was in Mathura. Now it's part of a mosque in, I can't say the name of the country. It was one Arabic country we go to preach sometimes, and some devotees, they took us there. They carried thousands of miles some of the original stones from that temple to this Islamic country. So Aurangzeb was a very, very demoniac person. He did so many very terrible things. And later he sent soldiers to come to Orissa. In 1691, he ordered an attack on the temple of Lord Jagannath. He sent his general, whose name was Nawab Ikram Khan. He was a nephew of the former Akbar, former emperor of Mughal emperor of India. And so many terrible things happened at that time. I don't even like to speak about how they desecrated the temple of Lord Jagannath. But what they did at that time, Maharaj Dibya Singh Dev, the king of that time, who has the same name as the current king of Puri, he gave Ikram Khan the 4 wooden horses and chariot drivers from the Ratha-yatra carts. And there's a history book which we were studying, the Katik Raj Vangsavali, which states that he also gave 4 deities, Jagannath, Bali, Subhadra, Sudarshan, to Ikram Khan. But these were duplicate deities. They were not installed deities of Jagannath. And he gave them to Aurangzeb. And they took those deities and they put them on the steps of a mosque so that every Muslim who was going by, they could kick them. And in the meantime, they took the actual deities of Lord Jagannath to a hidden room, which is there to this day, I'm told. I've not been inside the Jagannath Mandir. A hidden room which is behind the temple of goddess Bimala Devi. And Jagannath's worship was going on secretly there. But still, Aurangzeb wasn't satisfied. He wanted to see the Ratha-yatra festival stopped once and for all. So he told his general, Mir Syed Muhammad, to go to Orissa and to put stationed troops on all the major roadways and not allow any pilgrims to go to Puri for the Ratha-yatra, just like today, where the police are all there on all the major roads and they're not allowing anyone to go in. This is the second year. But from the year 1691 to 1703, for 12 years, Jagannath had no Ratha-yatra festival in public. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. But his worship was being conducted secretly, without bells. Generally, they blow horns and things too during the puja. There's no horn blowing or anything at the time of the bhoga offerings. And there was a small entrance on the southern side of the temple, the boundary wall, and there was a tunnel at night they would go through, the pandas, to make offerings to the deities. And they did all the festivals, including even the Chandan Yatra festival, the Rukmini Harana festival, the Snan Yatra festival, and even the Ratha-yatra festival. They would enact that in that secret area without anybody being able to see it. But for those 12 years, the pilgrims weren't able to see the Jagannath Ratha-yatra. My Guru Maharaj used to say that Jagannath Puri is Gupta Vrindavan, it's hidden Vrindavan, but it's a chamber of Vrindavan. It's known as Vipralamba Kshetra, or Chaitra, depending on what part of India you're from, the place of separation. So during this time, it became Dvigunita Vipralamba Kshetra, the place of twice as much separation. Because barred by that army, the pilgrims, they stopped coming. And then there was no money coming from the pilgrims. All the prices of everything shot up in Puri, which is what's happening here today also. To buy sabji, to buy vegetables, I think it's the prices are like twice what they were 2 years ago, because there's no yatris coming now hardly. Everything's locked down. Somehow they allowed, I'm a Bideshi. I'm not sure if I'm a Deshi or a Bideshi, but anyway, we're living here in our house. We're living near Gopinath Pur. There's a 350-year-old temple of Radha Gopinath established by one of the kings of Puri, and he established a small village called Gopinath Pur, which is right next to a Taranala, or the bridge of Puri, and where our ashram is there. And anyway, so for 12 years, and the Chadaka Ponti is another history book, traditional history book of Orissa. It said that Puri at that time looked like a cremation ground. After 12 years of great spiritual and economic depression, and we can look forward to this also. There's a lot of people saying today that this pandemic is also just going to be the lead to worldwide economic depression. In Puri, there was a devotee of Lord Nrsingadev and Jagannath. His name was Ram Dayita Goswami. He's also known as Dinanath. He was a local Mahant. So this is in the year 1703. He decided this has to stop. And so he walked to Delhi, to get permission to put on the Ratha-yatra festival again. Just before he arrived at the palace of Aurangzeb, the night before, Aurangzeb had a dream, and he saw Koda. Did you ever hear this song, Koda Nitai, and wonder what does Koda mean? It's a very wonderful song. Koda means God, but Koda is an Islamic word for God. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is expressing his feelings in a very, very humble way. You're my God. You're the God even of the Muslims. I'm such a bad person. Koda Nitai. He had a dream. Aurangzeb had a dream, and he saw Koda, but he saw Koda manifested as Jagannath. And Jagannath ordered him in the dream, hey, Badmash, rascal, what are you doing? You allow this Ratha-yatra festival to go on. And the next morning, Aurangzeb woke up, and he was thinking about his dream. Let me see here if I can bring up a picture here. Whoops. Okay, let's see here. 1 second. This is a very old picture of Aurangzeb there with his sword. Aurangzeb, that next morning, he woke up after that amazing dream of seeing Koda, his God, come before him in the form of Lord Jagannath and telling him, hey, Badmash, I want my Ratha-yatra festival to go on again. When he woke up the next morning, Aurangzeb was thinking about that. And then one of his servants came in and said, there's some Hare Krishna devotee here to see you, some guy from Puri. And generally, Aurangzeb might not allow them to come to have darshan of him, but he waved him in. And that Ram Dayita Goswami, he told him, hey, you should allow the Ratha-yatra to continue. And Aurangzeb said, you're right. I agree. And then Aurangzeb, not only that, we found out something very, very interesting, which to my knowledge is the first time historically anyone found out about this. We found out that Aurangzeb, he felt so bad that he'd done this thing. So he decided he would donate some property to Lord Jagannath. And there's a place called Markandapur, Tarhasali, which is where present-day Kurda Road Junction, a railway station, is at. And Aurangzeb donated some property there to Lord Jagannath. Now, it's easy to say that, right? But we want to see some evidence. So I sent a local devotee, because they wouldn't allow me inside, right? Bideshi Prabeshni Shade. They wouldn't allow me inside of the Jagannath, the Orissa State Archives. I sent one of our local friends there, and he found this document written in Farsi and signed by Aurangzeb, donating property to Lord Jagannath. Now, if you can read Farsi, maybe you can read that. You can see his seal on it and things. This is proof that Aurangzeb served Lord Jagannath. Very amazing thing. So we should think about this at this point. We don't want to become like the Karens who just complain, oh, Jagannath, why are you doing like this? This is not good. Rather, in the Jagannath Ashtakam, it said, Aho dine nate nahita chadano nishchita midam Jagannath Swami noyana patagami bhavatu me. When that devotee begins to cry in the heart, oh Jagannath, I want to see you. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati once criticized. He says that this is not our prayer. Some people, they're praying, Jagannatha Swami Nayana Patagami Bhavatu Me. But it doesn't mean that it's not our prayer. It means that it's that prayer he's speaking about is the prayer of many materialistic people who want to see Lord Jagannath for their own pleasure. We don't want to see Jagannath for that. The gopis of Vrindavan, they could have walked to Mathura. Radhanath Maharaj, every year for many years before he became the famous worldwide Acharya in ISKCON, when he would go to Vrindavan, he would go by train to Mathura and he would walk from Mathura to Vrindavan. It's not that far. So why don't the gopis just walk to Mathura if they really want to see Krishna? Their desire is not just to see Krishna. Their desire is to serve Krishna. Well, okay, they can serve him in Mathura. No. The udipanas, the ingredients for ecstasy, for ecstatic service, which are there in Vrindavan, like Vamsivat, like the Jamuna, like Govardhan, are not present in Mathura. And the gopis, therefore, they want him in Vrindavan. And therefore, there's a Ratha-yatra festival. And they meet with Krishna in Kurukshetra. And they say, Ahushchate nalina nava padara vinda. That's it would take me a long time to discuss that verse. Only verse, Shukadeva Goswami says, that the gopis speak to Krishna at Kurukshetra. And this verse is spoken by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and our Goswamis have described it has a number of different meanings. One meaning is the gopis are saying, oh, you're God. You're the Supreme Personality of God. Please accept our prayers. Who are we? We're just fallen household ladies. We can't understand you. But the inner meaning is, oh, now you've become a big man. Now you've gone to Dwarka and everybody's worshiping you. They say you're God. Do you still remember Vrindavan? Do you still remember your mother, Yashoda? Do you still remember the gopis of Vrindavan? Do you still remember Vamsivat? Do you remember Govardhan Hill and the Jamuna River? Do you remember Shrimati Radharani? This is the mood of Ratha-yatra, where the gopis, the Brijbasis, are going to Kurukshetra and they're rescuing God, that personality who's just actually their homeboy, their beloved Krishna. They're rescuing him from mechanical, organized religion and bringing him to the village of their heart. And we call that Ratha-yatra. But that Ratha-yatra begins with this anavasya period, this nibrita, this seclusion in a solitary place when Lord Jagannath is locked up. It begins with a desire. So also we can see in our part that we may complain, we may say this is not fair and I want to go and protest why these people, they're not allowing us to go to the temple as much as we want, or they're not allowing us to do this or that, or we have to wear a mask. But you know, if you can't fight against something, maybe it's Krishna's arrangement. And if it's Krishna's arrangement, then maybe he's trying to evoke something in our heart. And therefore in Jagannath Ashtakam says, Aho dine nate nahita charano nishchita midam. That when someone feels himself very, very low and fallen, and they cry, Jagannath Swami, Nayana Patagami, Bhavatu Me. Oh Jagannath, I want to see you, I want to serve you. I can't come together with the devotees now. We can't go to Nupanihati so easily now. Now there's only darshan online and it's not the same. We want to see you. When the devotees cry and cry in that way, that crying becomes a wonderful treasure that they've gotten. It looks like a kind of abuse, but that abuse is actually a very wonderful gift that Krishna gives us. And we see this in this place known as Vipralamba Kshetra, Jagannath Puri Dham, the place of separation. So I'm sorry I've spoken so long. I hope that Adi Gadadhar Prabhu is not angry with me and gotten in big trouble or something with everybody. But I'd just like to ask Adi Gadadhar Prabhu, do we have time? If the devotees have any reflections? I'm following Vaisheshika Prabhu, who's one of my wonderful dear friends, and he always asks for reflections at the end of a katha, you may know. Such a nice thing. And it helps me to understand that not everybody was falling asleep because you're not even showing your screens. And I saw that only 2 or 3 of the ladies were even worried about their husbands leaving them. It's very concerning, very dangerous thing. So I'd like to see as many faces as I can. And if anybody has any reflections or something, I would appreciate it. Or maybe questions, but I like reflections. Anybody has...
Dear Madhavendra Prabhu, thank you so much for such a enlivening, mesmerizing class. We didn't even realize how 1 hour passed, and we just want you to continue speaking. So yes, Prabhu, we have lots of time, but I know your Vaidya has asked you to take rest on time. So how much ever time you can spare for us, we are very grateful. So dear devotees, if there are any reflections, please go ahead. You can unmute yourself or raise. Tushar Prabhu, go ahead, please.
Hare Krishna, Madhavanand Prabhu, thank you so much for the wonderful class. One reflection I wanted to...
Can I see who's speaking?
Yes, Prabhu, 1 second. Can you see me, Prabhu? Hare Krishna?
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. One reflection I'd like to share is how, one thing I was thinking about is in Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, Matra Sparshastu Kaunteya, Sitoshna Sukha Dukkada. So based on your talk, I realized not even material life, but even in spiritual life, we have to tolerate all the different things that Krishna has to push us through. So I think that also is valid for spiritual life. So thank you so much, especially in the Vipalamba Bhav. So very good.
Yes. We see in the pastimes of Sita and Ram, Prabhupada comments in one place that even if you're the Supreme Personality of Godhead, when you get married, it means you're going to have to cry. Right? Every husband has to cry at one point or another. Not just we always hear about the ladies crying, but the husbands also have to cry sometimes too. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. That's very good. Anybody else with some reflection?
Yes, Amarendra Prabhu, please go ahead.
Amarendra Prabhu, that's you. Oh my gosh. Hare Krishna. You're like part of Nupani Hati Dham, I think, huh?
Yes,
he's our very own boy.
Yeah. You're the homeboy there.
So, Prabhuji, I really want to express gratitude. I was hearing, okay, I think there's
somebody's not muted.
Yeah, I think there's some Man Leela going on somewhere. Okay, so I really liked the class, Prabhuji. It was backed up with so much reference and so much research. I had never honestly heard about Aurangzeb falling on his knees and surrendering to Jagannath's sweet will. Although it was a pain to my heart to know that how Jagannath, Baldev, Subhadra, even if it's an imitation form, were given to Aurangzeb for a bad purpose, and Ratha-yatra stopped for such a long time. It was very painful. My question is, Prabhuji, we hear about the man of Lakshmi Devi. So my question is, do the acharyas write something about the difference between the man of Lakshmi Devi and the man of Srimati Radhika in Vrindavan?
I haven't seen anything about that. The Vamadeva-samhita says the things that I expressed. We quoted those verses, which definitely makes her like a left-wing personality. Mm-hmm. She's not very submissive. She's very, very angry. And that's a very interesting thing. Perhaps a secret to that could be found in the very name of this Dham, which is Sri Kshetra, in which my Guru Maharaj commented that Sri means Sarva Angsini Radhika. That Srimati Radharani, who's the source of all the different Lakshmis. And this is the place of Srimati Radharani. And without getting into it extensively, it's a very big topic. We wrote an article about Jagannath and Radharani. Very interesting subject. Krishna Caitanya Mahaprabhu, he told me, he said, nobody's even asked this question before, much less given evidences and things about it. So there's a tradition, there's worship of Radharani here in Jagannath Puri in Orissa, which is older historically speaking. I'm not talking about Nitya Leela, but is older historically speaking than the worship of Radha in Braj.
Hare Krishna.
There were deities of Radha being worshipped here historically. And in fact, the very first deities of Radha who worship at Govindaji and Madan Mohan were sent from Orissa by Maharaj Purushottam Jana, the son of Maharaj Prataparudra. And that's discussed in the Bhakti Ratnakar. And if you look in the literature and the tradition, for example, here in Orissa, Radhastami is a government festival. You can't say that, I don't think, maybe in Barsana probably, but you can't say that about very few places in India, certainly not in West Bengal. Durga Puja is a big festival there. But here in Orissa, there's a traditional worship of Radha, and it also is expressed in the literatures. Fakir Mohan Babu shared that with me, and that's something we have this project. I can say a few words about, maybe called GORA, the Gaudiya Odia Research Association. And our desire is to research some of the old, little known Gaudiya literatures written in Odia language from the followers of Shyamananda Prabhu and Rasikananda and others that speak about Jagannath and Radharani and that, and translate those. But even before the time of the six Goswamis, before the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there was also a literary tradition of worship of Radha here in Orissa. So this is really Radharani's place. So some secret to Lakshmi Devi's man may be found in that. It's kind of a long answer to that. That's the best I can think of, Prabhuji.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Very beautiful. The perspective.
I was thinking, go ahead.
Please.
Perspective. You're not going to like my question that I have for you, so you finish your comment first.
I just wanted to say that the perspective towards Jagannath, the view of the vision towards Jagannath has just definitely changed for me. With all the beautiful details coming in, I think the way I'm going to see Jagannath on the altar is going to be very different than what I saw him yesterday.
You like the Katha tonight then?
I loved it. I really loved it. Although it's a little painful in the sense that from a Braj perspective, somehow the heart says that the exclusive right of man is for no one except Srimati Radhika. Not even Chandravali, not even Rukmini, not even Satyabhama. What to speak of Lakshmi?
Okay,
the heart.
Let's peel off another layer of this whole subject matter then. Lakshmi Devi here in the Jagannath, actually Subhadra manifests different moods. And this is discussed in the Skanda Purana. And it's said in the Skanda Purana that Lord Jagannath is avatar. It's also described in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita that he manifests whatever particular mood the devotees have. And therefore we see that when Tulsidas, the author of Ramcharit Manas, when he came to Jagannath Puri, he didn't see Jagannath Bali Subhadra, at least at first. Later, he saw Ram, Lakshman, Sita, Hanuman. And Subhadra manifested before him as Sita. So that there's a kind of perspective. This is the deity of Vipralamba, and this deity manifests according to the vision of the devotee. We can say that much. And there's some other things we could say about Radharani being manifest, but it's a little awkward. Maybe I should tell a little katha in a few minutes. I want to hear the comments from devotees about the bahudha Rath. It's something we researched about that from a Braj perspective. How do we understand that? You're taking Jagannath away from Vrindavan back to Dwarka, and we're taking part in that. That sounds really hellish. So I have Amarendra Prabhu. Everybody heard you. You were recorded. I think they're videotaping this. You expressed some appreciation for it. So I have some bakshish that I want to ask you. Okay? My bakshish that I want to ask you. You're doing some regular Zoom classes sometimes? You must be. So you please let me know. That's the bakshish that I want. And you send me the link, okay? Because I like very much to hear your katha. And more than just that, but I miss being with devotees and having some back and forth. Paraspara, the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam says, Paraspara katanam pavanam bhagavad. This is the nature of this katha that should be back and forth. And I'm so much appreciative. You'll do that for me?
I will definitely give you the link, Prabhuji, but that day I will play the class of Srila Gaur Govinda Maharaj.
But then there has to be discussion, okay? Thank you, Amarendra Prabhu.
Thank you.
Anybody else with any other reflections or something they'd like to share?
Hare Krishna, Madhavanand Prabhu. I really loved how you started the class by saying that once you had to give a public class on Jagannath Ratha-yatra, where all people were just coming out of a casino holding mugs of beer, and how you said that Ratha-yatra means rescuing the Lord from organized industrial religion and bringing him to his village, Vrindavan. And how you went a full circle and then you concluded your class with that same theme of Vraj Bhav. Prabhuji, but I have a question. I have actually several questions, but we don't have time. My first question is, you mentioned that Vimala Devi is the auntie of Jagannath.
Yes.
I wanted to know, how is that?
That's a very interesting question. I haven't found anything about that, but Jagannath has several aunties here in Orissa. There's a Purusha Bodhini Shruti, which is quoted by Rupa Goswami in some of his writings. It's a part of the Atharva Veda. It's a living Shruti. Our Fakir Mohan Prabhu, my teacher, did some research on this. And as far as I know, still in Kendrapar area in Orissa, they still have a living tradition of that Purusha Bodhini Shruti where the Brahmins, they memorize it, which is the traditional part. If you're Ek Veda, you've memorized one Veda. If you're Dvi Veda, you've memorized two. You're Tri Veda, you've memorized. If you're Chatur Veda, you've memorized all four Vedas. That was a tradition. So they have a tradition of this Purusha Bodhini Shruti of the Atharva Veda. And in the Purusha Bodhini Shruti, it says there that Yata Bhagavi Jamuna, Govardhana Ratna Samasana, Bhimala Sadosa Chandika, Sadosa Gopyaha. That here in Jagannath Puri, it's Gupta Vrindavan. Vrindavan, in the same way, the Bhargavi River goes around Jagannath Puri, and it's not different from the Jamuna. And there's other pramanas to support that, very interesting pramanas. It's another topic, it's a big subject. Govardhana Ratna Samasana, the Ratna Singhasan of Lord Jagannath, which they say is made out of 1 million shalagram shilas, is non-different from Govardhan Hill. And Chatak Parvat, we also say, is non-different from Govardhan. So, okay, our Brijbasi friends like Amarendra Prabhu, you'll say, that's nice. We've got the Jamuna River, we've got Govardhan Hill, but so what? We don't want to go there if there's no gopis. Prabhupada once told the editors of Back to Godhead magazine, they asked him, they said, Prabhupada, should we print things in Back to Godhead about the pastimes of Radha and Krishna? And Prabhupada said, no. And then Prabhupada said, but don't boycott the gopis. I think we're going to print this in our next Bindu magazine coming up. Don't boycott. We want gopis. So Amarendra Prabhu, I no doubt he wants gopis. So Bhimala Sadosa Chandika Sadosa Gopyaha. The Purusha Bodhini Shruti says that the 16 gopis of Braj, now wait a minute, who are the 16 gopis of Braj? The Astasakis and the Astamanjaris, which according to Dhyan Chandra Goswami in his Gorgovinda Smarana Archana Padati, he's a disciple of Gopal Guru Goswami. Dhyan Chandra Goswami describes there that Krishna has 16 Shaktis when he's Purnatama in Braj. He has 15 Shaktis when he's Purnatara, more complete, in Mathura. And he has 14 Shaktis when he's Purna in Dwarka. But here in Jagannath Puri, he has 16 Shaktis. And those 16 Shaktis are personified in the forms of the Astasakis and the Astamanjaris, and they're manifested in Puri in the form of the 16 Chandis. That's about all that I really know about how Bhimala Devi is the auntie of Lord Jagannath. But they describe her like that, and she has some kind of relationship like that. And there's several different Chandis who have that kind of relationship. I would be very interested to find out more about that, and maybe hopefully someday we'll find some local literature or something that describes more, and maybe we'll come to Atlanta even and share that something with you. I don't know. Is that okay, Adi Gadadhar Prabhu?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Madhavan. So, Prabhuji, one last question. I have several, but I'll just ask one more. After hearing about the Shaligram Shila, I'm really intrigued. In Srila Sanatan Goswami's Krishna Leela Sthava, there is one verse where he says that in his Udar, there is a Shaligram Shila.
Yeah,
and then I have heard that. So, can you please elaborate on that?
Okay, I was going to tell you another story, and this is a good lead-in for that story. Lord Jagannath has what's known as the Nabi Brahma. Brahma means the light. Nabi Brahma means the life force, and that Nabi Brahma is. There's many different stories what that is, and we wrote some article about that in one of our magazines, and we debunked some of the stories. One of the stories is that it's part of Krishna's navel from Dwarka Yuga. That when Krishna left his body, when Jara the hunter shot him in the foot at the place known as Prabhas, then Krishna had Arjun burn the body, and the body completely burned, but there was this nabi which was left, the navel. And then there was an Akashvani. Krishna instructed Arjun to the Akashvani, throw it in the water. And so he threw it in the water, and it went all the way around Cape Comer, and it came to Jagannath Puri, and it was installed inside of the deity of Lord Jagannath. They say it like that. There's some reasons why we don't accept that. It's a long, complicated thing. But anyway, to get to the quick, there's a life force inside of Lord Jagannath, which is transferred every time there's a Navakalavram festival. The 1996, we had a Navakalavram. I was there for that. And just a couple of years ago, we had another Navakalavram. The prior one before that was when Srila Prabhupada left this world. And then 1996 was when my Gromars left this world. About every 12 or 20 years or so, and it's according to the moon calendar, they have this festival, and Lord Jagannath changes his body, and they transfer this life force. They do it in a dark night, an Amavasya night, and they turn out all the lights in Puri, and only one Panda, the head Panda, is allowed to transfer it. He has something wrapped around his hands. He has a blindfold put over his eyes. They say if you saw it, you would die. They say there was one Panda who looked at it and he left his body. In fact, they say that every Panda for the last 6 or 8 Navakalavram festivals who's transferred the Nabi Brahma has left his body within a year or two after doing it. Whether they look or not. Anyway, they transfer that form, that thing from the old deity to the new deity. Now, when did that begin? It's not exactly sure. And we spoke something about the Islamic rule in Jagannath Puri, and how from 1691 to 1703, Jagannath's worship was stopped by Aurangzeb. But prior to that, there was also, the Muslims had invaded Puri, and there's a local history book, the Madhula Punji, which, by the way, you've may have heard of Vamadeva-Devi, one of Mahaprabhu's most intimate associates. It's said locally that she was ordered by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to write that Madhula Punji. It's like a history book of the Jagannath Mandir. There's another book called the Chakadapoti, which I mentioned before. In both of those books, as well as the Islamic Aina-i-Akbari by Abul Fazl, speak about the year 1590, prior to the time of Aurangzeb, and how the Muslim king of Bengal, who was Sultan Suleiman, he sent his general Kalapahad. And Kalapahad, there's a long story about him. I won't go there either. He was originally, he was from the village of Ramakeli, where Rupa and Sanatan Goswami grew up. And he was a Hindu who became a Muslim. And it's a long, terrible story how that happened. But anyway, Kalapahad really didn't like the Vaishnavas or Jagannath, and it's a long story. But he came to Puri for the purpose of breaking the temple, and he captured the deities of Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra. He put them on an elephant, and he carried them to Kolkata, and then on the bank of the Hooghly River, the Ganga, he lit a big fire, and he threw the deities inside. This is an historical episode, which is mentioned in a number of different books. One thing, though, that Kalapahad didn't know, there was a devotee of Jagannath, his name was Bishar Mahanti. And Bishar Mahanti secretly followed them all the way from Jagannath Puri to Kolkata. And when he saw they were burning the body of his Lord Jagannath, he couldn't control himself. He waited for an opportune moment, and then suddenly he jumped into the fire. And the Muslims are watching, oh my God, this crazy Hindu guy. And there's this big, huge fire. Lord Jagannath, One of the Pandits once brought me on the chariot to embrace Lord Jagannath. He actually shoved me into the deity of Jagannath. That's another story. Jagannath's like 7.5, 8 feet high. He's huge. It must have been a very big fire. And then all of a sudden, this crazy guy just jumps into the fire. And the fire was burning for many hours. And by the end of the day, the Muslims, they'd all left. And the fire had become very small. And then suddenly, Bishar Mahanti, this is a history here in Puri, he came out of the fire unharmed and walked off. And there was a couple guards left, and they were like, didn't know what to do. They were stunned by that. Because Bishar Mahanti knew that in the belly of Lord Jagannath was a Nabi Brahma. And he grabbed a hold of that Nabi Brahma, and due to his contact with it, and by the mercy of the Lord, he was untouched by the fire. So he put that Nabi Brahma inside a mridanga drum, and he came back to Jagannath Puri. And the king of Puri, who at that time his name was Raj Ramachandra Devi, had a dream. Jagannath appeared to him and said, don't lament, it's okay. You think it's all terrible because they took me to the Hooghly and they burned me, but I'm still present. My dear devotee Bishar Mahanti retrieved my Nabi Brahma, and he's staying near Kurda, which is where the kings of Puri used to stay. So you go there and bring me back here to the Puri Jagannath Mandir. So Ramachandra Dev did, and he reinstalled the deity there. Some historians consider this act, which was in 1590, to be the first Navakalevaram festival. And because of that act, Ramachandra Dev became known as Dvitiya Indradyumna, or Abhinava Indradyumna, the second or new Indradyumna, meaning Indradyumna, the personality who originally established the deity of Lord Jagannath. So, is that okay? Did you get more than you expected, more than your money?
Yes, that was very disturbing and painful story, but yes, thank you. I didn't know this historical story.
Yeah, this is the nature of the Lord. Sometimes it's said in Brihad Bhagavatamrita that in this suffering there's also the greatest ecstasy. And so in this story, there's as one writer wrote about Michelangelo, the famous writer, they wrote a book called The Agony and the Ecstasy. So both of these things are there in Lord Jagannath. Both of these things are there in Vrindavan. The agony and the ecstasy. There's the agony, oh my God, Kalapahad took Jagannath away and went and burned him. But there's the ecstasy. You can't stop us. You can't stop Lord Jagannath. And Bishar Mahanti, he took that Nabi Brahma and brought him back. There's the ecstasy. Yeah. Devotees' feelings, we can't even imagine what it must have been like that year when Lord Jagannath was reinstalled.
Yes, and it's amazing you said that he's called the second King Indradyumna. That is so sweet. And Sanatan Goswami wrote, way before this episode. So that means even Sanatan Goswami knew about the Navi Brahman and the Shaligram Kila that's inside of Jagannath.
And it's, I don't want to get in, it's a long thing, but I have some very good evidence what that Nabi Brahma is. That the Nabi Brahma is what they call a living shalagram. What is a living shalagram? Shalagram is a stone, and we know that Lord Vishnu was cursed to become a stone, and the demigods were cursed to become the worms, which eat that stone, and they make these different markings, and according to the markings, the stone is a particular manifestation of the Lord. So it's called a living shalagram when those insects are still alive. And they say that Nabi Brahma is a living shalagram, which was given by the king of Nepal. And the evidence that I have for that, I don't have right handy with me, but there's prayers. The king of Nepal, he doesn't come very often to the Jagannath Mandir. If he comes, there's more protocol, there's more ceremonies and rituals they have to do to receive him than the king of Puri. And when they receive him, they recite certain prayers. And some of the prayers are that you gave this shalagram, which is inside of Lord Jagannath. That's the evidence that we found. I'm thinking to try to print that in our next magazine about the esoteric significance of Jagannath Puri. So
amazing. Madhana Prabhu, how do we get those magazines? Kathamrit Bindu, I'm subscribed through Facebook and through email I get, but those big magazines, how do we get?
We could post something to you from India. I can tell you though, but not right now. The international post is not working. You could send someone to India, but you can't do that right now because there's no international travel. Our visa expired last August and we're still here in India. Somehow we stay on a student visa usually because of the lockdown. Yeah, we could post something to you or someone coming to India, but right now with the lockdown.
But all the magazines are there, even Alalnath and all those previously printed magazines are all there.
They're all out, some of them are out of print. The Alalnath magazine's out of print, but we can make a color Xerox copy for you. If you're
Thank
nice.
you so much. I will personally come by your blessings and take. I really want them.
Because you're friends with Amarendra and Hari Parshad, you must be a very special personality, I know.
Thank you. I'm very fortunate to
Does
have both
anybody
of them.
else have any reflections they'd like to share?
Prabhu, I think there is one on the chat. I
Okay.
think it says ISKCON Atlanta, but it's another friend of mine. His name is Karthik.
It says, I'm unable to speak or show my face at this moment, but I just wanted to thank you for such an amazing class. Prabhu, could you please tell us more of the deeper research you've conducted on the history of Lord Jagannath and Ratha-yatra? Okay, that's a good excuse for me to tell another story that I wanted to tell. So, what about the Bahudha Ratha-yatra? This is some research that I did about that. I had this question. Okay, what is this return Ratha-yatra? How do we understand that? That certainly doesn't sound very nice. That we're taking Lord Jagannath away from Sundarachal and taking him back to the Sri Mandir. And this festival, I had these questions. Did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu take part in this return Ratha-yatra? And if he did, how did he participate in it? So first of all, let's briefly examine. I gave a class recently for the devotees in New Jersey about Ratha-yatra from the perspective mostly from a little known literature called Vrindavan Lilamrita by Nanda Kishore Goswami, who's in the line of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and primarily from Jiva Goswami's Gopal Champu, about the meeting in Kurukshetra. So let's, without going into the history and story about the meeting in Kurukshetra, let's examine it through a lens, okay? I have a lens here in my drawer, right? This is a magnifying glass. So we want to look through the lens of rasa, through the teachings of our Goswamis, and what are the feelings which are taking place there. Okay, so there's Milan. It's called Samriddhi Man Sambhog. Samriddhi Man Sambhog is one of the 4 different types of union which takes place after Sudura Prabhas. Sudura Prabhas, Prabhas is one of the 4 types of separation. This is a little technical. Just fasten your safety belts, you'll survive. And there's 2 types of Prabhas, Dura Prabhas and Sudura Prabhas. Dura Prabhas is when Krishna goes to Kamyavan or some forest and the gopis can't see him for a few hours. But Sudura Prabhas is also known as Mathura Dwarka Prabhas. And it's when Krishna leaves to go to Mathura Dwarka and the gopis don't know if they'll ever see him again. So Samriddhi Man Sambhog is that it means fully enriched union, which takes place after Sudura Prabhas, after Krishna is gone for so long. So that Samriddhi Man Sambhog takes place in Kurukshetra. That's one thing we can see through the lens of rasa. But there's other things which take place there also. The gopis, they're feeling so happy to see Krishna, but they're also feeling a little angry. Hey, you promised us when you left, you said, Ayasya, I'm going to return, and you didn't return. Actually, did return. That's another discussion. But you badmash, you rascal, you didn't return. They're angry. There's some anger on behalf of the gopis. So it's a mixture of feelings. There's Samriddhi Man Sambhog, but there's also some man. And there's a third feeling. And the third feeling is also a kind of Sudura Prabhas, because they know that in a few days, Krishna is going to return to Dwarka. They're feeling all this separation that they felt for so long we didn't see. They can't forget that separation when Krishna was gone. They're feeling sulky about that. They're feeling a Samriddhi Man Sambhog, this ecstasy of union, but they're also feeling Sudura Prabhas because you left us for so long, and very soon again you're going to leave us. So these are the feelings in Kurukshetra. Now, to understand what we found out about the Bahudha Rath, it's important for us to comment on these things. I think that Amarendra Prabhu had to go off, or he would have liked to hear this discussion we're going to give you now, because it's a little more Braj-like.
Yeah, Prabhu, actually, he had a class for ISKCON Baltimore. He postponed it, but he couldn't postpone it beyond Saturday.
Okay. So Amarendra Prabhu is just one of the best. He's one of Amarendra and Hari Parshabhu. They're our hope for the future. So anyway, I went around and and also we can mention at Kurukshetra, there's other feelings too, because Krishna's there, but there's so much opulence there also. You got all these Brahmins running around saying, Om Sahasrasir Sa Purushaha Sahasraksha Sahasra, reciting Purusha Shukta, and everybody's worshiping Krishna. And the gopis are like, what is this? We want you in Vrindavan. There's all this gold and jewels and opulence. So that's another feeling that's going on in Kurukshetra. Kurukshetra is a combination of mixed feelings, opposing feelings in one container. So I was inquiring. I went to many sadhus in Puri. I went to the king of Puri. I went to all the mahants, the leaders, sadhus here in Puri, and I asked them, did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu take part in this festival? And basically the reply I got from them was no. He did not take part in it. But then I read in Madhya Lila chapter 15, text 16 of Chaitanya-caritamrta, that during the 4-month period of Chaturmasya, that the associates of Mahaprabhu took part in all the festivals of Jagannath and Puri, which would include the Bahudha Ratha-yatra festival. So then how did he take part in it? It said there that Mahaprabhu took part. He took part in all the festivals, but what mood did he take part in? And after some time, I came across a very rare book in Sanskrit, which is considered to be perhaps the first biography of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's a little controversial because there's only 2 manuscripts ever found of it, and some people say that it was interpolated in some places. But it's written by Murari Gupta, one of the personal associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That book is called Sri Krishna Caitanya-caritamrta. And there in the 4th canto of that book, in the 21st chapter, in the 2nd verse, he comments about the Bahudha Ratha-yatra, and he says that Mahaprabhu took part in that festival. And he explains how he did it. He says, Gorachandro Ratam Anugata. That Gorachandra Ratam, that moon-like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Anugata Ratam, he followed behind the cart of Lord Jagannath. Just like the Gopikas in Vrindavan, when Akrura was taking Krishna away from Vrindavan, the Gopis, they took part in that chariot festival also. It wasn't a festival for them, it was a festival for the residents of Mathura. But the Gopis took part in that festival. They went behind the cart. They were throwing themselves in front of the cart. They went behind the cart and they cried and said, don't go, don't go, don't go. And so this is how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took part in that festival. And although all the king of Puri and all the different pandas and scholars and mahants that I spoke to here in Puri, they all told me no, Mahaprabhu didn't take part in the festival. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says he did, and Murari Gupta says that he did, but he gave an answer that I found very, very satisfying, because this is the mood of Kurukshetra. Jagannath Puri means the mood of Kurukshetra, where the Brijbasis are present, but they're present when Krishna is there with so much opulence. But that opulence, unlike general opulence, which is mentioned by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in Chaitanya-caritamrta, he says that Aishvarya Priti Sankuchita, that opulence makes the love shrunken. In Jagannath Puri, it becomes the opposite. Just like the gopis, when they see the opulence of Krishna in Kurukshetra, it doesn't make them in awe and reverence. They don't start offering prayers, although it seems like it. But actually, their words, that there's some double talk going on there, and they're actually chastising Krishna and saying, do you remember, now you're a big man, do you remember Mother Yashoda? Do you remember Vrindavan? In this way, there's some double talk going on. So in the same way, their love doesn't shrink, rather it becomes bigger, becomes more intense. And so in the same way, Jagannath Puri, the feelings are here. When the Lord is being controlled by Lakshmi Devi in the Sri Mandir, the Vrindavan devotees, they feel some pain and they want to rescue him from that mechanical organized religion. They want to bring him to their heart of Vrindavan. So I don't know who asked that question. I hope that's an okay answer. I got to tell my story that I wanted to tell. Okay, anybody else with any reflections? We've gone really, really over time like anything. My wife is going to be angry with me, I'm afraid. Maybe not. She looks happy. Okay. Anybody else with any reflection or anything? Nice to see you, Leela Purushottam Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Okay. Anybody else with any final? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and check out and take your permission. I think you have some announcements or something also, isn't it, Adi Radha Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhuji. Our Sadananda Ramchandra Prabhu will take care of that.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Madhavan Prabhu, once again. Thank you. Blissful. You made our Ratha-yatra day very special. Hare
Okay,
Krishna.
so Adi Gadadhar Prabhu, I have a question for you. Did
Yes,
you
sir.
like our katha tonight?
Very, very much.
Okay, so since you liked it, then I'm going to ask some bakshish from you. Just
Hare
like I asked from Amarendra. My bakshish I have to ask from you. When you come to Jagannath Puri, you come and visit us, come to our ashram so we can give you some prasadam. That's the
Thank you.
bakshish I want.
Thank you, dear Madhavan Prabhu. It will be my great honor to come and take your darshan and Mataji's darshan. I will certainly come by your blessings. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai.
Ki jai. Sri Jagannath Swami ki. Sri Jagannath Ratha-yatra Mahamahotsava ki. Gaur
Jai.
Prema Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Hari Bol. And dear Madhavananda Prabhu, just one very quick thing. Today, it being Ratha-yatra in New Paniyati Dham, it is also the divine appearance day of Srila Radha Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj, Amarendra Prabhu and Parshad Prabhu's spiritual. So we are having a celebration this evening here.
And do you know where he appeared? Do you know the story about that?
No.
It's an amazing story. Radha Govinda Maharaj is one of our great heroes. My Guru Maharaj had great love for him. His mother came to Jagannath Puri for Ratha-yatra. And the Ratha-yatra festival was going on, and her water broke, and she started giving birth. That's pretty good. That's a pretty amazing appearance in Jagannath Puri on Ratha-yatra day. That's Radha Govinda Maharaj.
Jai ho, Jai ho. Thank you.
Radha Govinda Maharaj ki jai.
Jai.
Samaveda Bhaktavinda ki jai. Vacha Kalpadurubhischa. Kripa Sindhubheva cha patitanam pavanebhyo. Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Nandakori Vaishnavinda ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you again.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your amazing Nectarian class. We look forward to having you again as well. It was amazing hearing such nectar and so many things that we wouldn't have heard before, especially from your research and things like that. And we look forward to hearing more of your research and maybe even reading some of your publishing that you would be doing. I'm sure it's coming and in the pipeline. So we once again thank you very much, and we look forward to even seeing you in person, as you said. It would be nice to have you in person and hear from you as well.
Well, you know, I was a Sankirtan devotee in Alachua, Florida, and we used to sometimes come with some of the devotees for the festivals in Atlanta and things, which I still think goes on to this day.
Yeah, they do come in for festivals and things like that. So, as I said, Prabhu, it would be amazing to have your presence in person, and we look forward to it very much.
And I want to thank all of you very much for preserving that very, very important place, Srila Prabhupada's Gaurani Thai, and such a wonderful story, how Prabhupada established those deities and cried. And it's very close to our heart. He's only there for a few hours, but we always think of Srila Prabhupada. And I know all of you remember Prabhupada there. The last time I was there, you still on the walls in the temple, you have all the photos of Prabhupada?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, such a special thing.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you're doing. It's a great austerity sometimes, honestly, to cooperate together and work together. But if we do that for the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada and our Guru Janas, it's a very wonderful service. And I thank all of you very much for preserving a very important temple.
Yes. Thank you so much. We need your blessings to keep continuing and making this a much bigger center for preaching and spreading the movement. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So now we will quickly move on to our announcements for the day. We also thank Adigadada Prabhu for arranging the session with Madhavanand Prabhu. Wouldn't have been possible if he hadn't gotten in touch with him. So let me just quickly move on to the announcements and we will close out. Okay. So starting next week, we will be covering different leelas and glories of Sri Krishna and Balram as we lead up to Sri Krishna Janmashtami. Janmashtami is around a month and a half away, so we will be drowning in the nectar of Sri Krishna and Sri Balaram as we lead up to Janmashtami. So please keep joining us. We will send out more details regarding the programs coming from next week. Hopefully by the Wednesday or the midweek program, we should have more details. Speaking of the midweek program, this weekend we have His Grace Sachiprana Prabhu who will be speaking, and he is going to be speaking on Srila Gopala Bhatta Goswami. As all of you know, the midweek program happens on Wednesday at 7 p.m. So please join us on July 14th, this Wednesday at 7 p.m. to hear about the glories of Srila Gopala Bhatta Goswami. Also at the temple, we are slowly trying to open things up. I'm just starting off with kirtans. So 6 p.m. in the evening today, please make sure if you have the time to drop by the temple and attend some wonderful kirtan by the devotees of Atlanta. Also, some of the upcoming festivals, as all of you know, today is the special day of Ratha-yatra or the chariot festival of Lord Jagannath. And yes, we had an amazing session with Madhavanand Prabhu hearing the glories about the Ratha-yatra. Also on July 20th is Shayana Ekadashi, the breaking fast for 21st is just actually 16 minutes. So we'll probably announce that next week as well. So please keep that in mind. Also, we have a whole bunch of disappearance days. As we mentioned, we're doing the 6 Goswamis series on the midweek program. We have Srila Sanatan Goswami's disappearance day on the 23rd. We have Srila Gopala Bhatta Goswami's disappearance day on the 28th and Sri Lokanatha Goswami's disappearance day on the 31st. Also, as all of you know, it is Janmashtami season. August 22nd, we have Balram Jayanti, the appearance day of Lord Balaram. On August 30th, we have Sri Krishna Janmashtami, the appearance day of Lord Sri Krishna. On August 31st, we have the appearance day of our founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada. And on September 13th, we have the appearance day of Srimati Radharani or Radhashtami. Moving on to prayers, as all of you know, this was around the time His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj left the planet last year. So last week was the actual day according to the Gregorian calendar, which he passed away. I think his tithi is coming sometime in the next week or two. We also are requesting prayers for His Holiness Jabtak Maharaj. There was some minor complications in between. Also Govardhan Leela Mataji, who's the temple vice president here. And also all the doctors who have helped with fighting off COVID in the past year and a half. So we request prayers for all of them. So let's chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra 3 times. We actually also have today's Deity Darshan, which has just come in. I was able to put this together. So let's chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra 3 times before we move on to the Nrsimha prayers. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So today we have Prathamesh and his wonderful sister Vamshi who will be singing the Nrsimha prayers. So over to you guys. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Babaji, thank you. Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Vamshi and Prathamesh, for your amazing singing and mridanga playing. We look forward to having you all soon. And thank you all for joining and see you all next week. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.